Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sound Mind podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of music psychology. I'm your host, Sophia, and as a music psychologist, I'll be guiding you through everything you've ever wondered about music. So, whether you're a music lover or are just interested in the science of sound, you're in the right place. Now, here's a question for you. Can you taste music? Okay, maybe that sounds a bit strange, but think about it. Have you ever noticed that food just hits differently when the right song is playing? Or that a romantic dinner feels richer with some soft jazz in the background? Or a crunchy snack just feels more satisfying when you can actually just hear that satisfying crunch? Well, today's episode is all about the science and psychology of sonic flavor. How the music we hear can actually influence the food that we taste. We'll look at the research behind why certain songs can make chocolate taste sweeter, how restaurants use music to guide appetite, and what ASMR has to do with food cravings. We'll even dig into a rare condition where people can literally taste sounds. So, whether you're a foodie or, of course, a music lover, this one's for you. So, grab a snack and let's get into it. Now, the central idea to music and food perception is something called cross-modal perception. And this is the idea that our senses don't operate in isolation. Instead, they're constantly influencing one another. So, cross-modal perception is the scientific term for how stimuli in one sensory modality, say sound, can alter our experience in another, like taste or smell. And it's part of a wider field called multisensory integration. One of the most fascinating applications of this is something called sonic seasoning, which is the idea that specific sounds can enhance or alter the way that we perceive flavor. And this idea has been popularized and extensively researched, and the results are so fascinating. Now, something we all love is chocolate, right? So there was an experiment published in 2017 where participants tasted identical pieces of chocolate while listening to two different soundtracks. One was designed to evoke creaminess and the other roughness. And the creamy soundtrack, it featured these kind of long, smooth, legato flute notes with a large hall kind of reverb and a slow tempo. And this was all designed to evoke this kind of softness and richness. And in contrast, the rough soundtrack, that was composed of short, kind of dissonant staccato, pizzicato notes played by violins, with dry acoustics and a slightly faster pace. Now, both soundtracks were the same length and loudness, which was to make sure that any differences in taste perception weren't due to the volume or duration. But the result was that the participants rated the chocolate as creamier and sweeter when paired with the creamy soundtrack, even though the chocolate was exactly the same. And this beautifully illustrates the principle of sonic seasoning, how our brains use sound to shape what we taste. But interestingly, while participants preferred the creamy soundtrack, the difference didn't significantly affect their overall enjoyment of the chocolates, which really shows that music can have a perceptual effect on gustatory food attributes without necessarily altering our hedonic experience, so our overall enjoyment. So it truly is an enhancer. But it's not just musical characteristics. Emotion plays a crucial role as well. So music, as we know, it has this remarkable ability to shift our mood in a matter of seconds. And that emotional shift can directly influence how we perceive taste. This phenomenon is known as emotional priming, where one stimulus, such as music, subconsciously shapes our response to another, like food. In other words, our mood becomes a filter through which we experience flavor. Research has shown that music's mode, tempo, and harmonic structure can prime us to experience certain tastes more intensely. For example, major key melodies with an upbeat rhythm that often evoke positive emotions can actually make food seem more indulgent, comforting, or even sweeter. And in contrast, slower tempos, minor keys, or more dissonant harmonies are often associated with sadness or tension, and these can lead us to perceive food as less pleasant or to highlight its bitter or sour notes. One striking example of emotional priming in action comes from a 2011 study where the style of background music was found to influence the way that people described wine. When classical music was played, participants rated the wine as more refined and sophisticated. Meanwhile, pop music led to descriptions that highlighted liveliness and sweetness, despite the fact that the wine was literally exactly the same. And this illustrates how music doesn't just affect our feelings, but it also reframes our sensory perception due to these feelings. And I think that this interplay is especially relevant when we consider how music and food are often ritualistically paired with one another. So think about candlelit dinners with soft jazz or romantic ballads, where the goal isn't just to eat, but to feel something. Or think about those upbeat pop songs playing in a brunch cafe that energize the atmosphere and make the whole experience feel more fun and satisfying. The music isn't just background, it's flavoring your experience, shaping your expectations, memories, and emotional reactions before you've even taken a bite. Essentially, music can season our meals emotionally, priming us to experience them in a specific, often more enhanced way. And then there's something called Proustian memory. And this is a phenomenon where a single taste or smell can instantly transport us back in time. It was named after French novelist Marcel Proust, who famously described how the taste of a madeleine dipped in tea, so, one of those mini sponge cake things that are shaped like a shell. So that really unleashed for him a cascade of childhood memories. But this isn't just literary romanticism, it's rooted in brain science. So the olfactory bulb and the gustatory cortex, which process smell and taste, are uniquely positioned in the brain. They've got direct links to the limbic system, which is home to the amygdala and hippocampus, which are responsible for processing emotions and storing our autobiographical memories. And these are your memories of specific events in your life. But this close neural proximity explains why taste and smell can evoke memories that are unusually vivid, emotional, and personal. Researchers have identified several other key characteristics of Proustian memory. So it's often involuntary and sudden, which means that it's triggered unexpectedly without any conscious effort to specifically recall the past memory. The resulting memory also has a strong emotional impact, so it's very often really infused with nostalgia. But perhaps most poignantly, these memories are frequently linked to childhood, a time when sensory impressions are still fresh and unfiltered. Now, imagine adding music to the mix. Music is a powerful trigger for autobiographical memory, especially when it's emotionally charged or tied to those meaningful moments. It does activate many of the same brain regions, including the hippocampus and amygdala, and it's even been shown to help individuals with dementia retrieve long-lost memories. When food, smell, and sound align, it creates this multi-sensory portal to the past. It's more than nostalgia, it's embodied memory, a felt experience that can momentarily bring back the emotional landscape of who we once were in a fleeting moment. Together, music and food don't just stimulate the senses, they tell our stories, resurface our histories, and reconnect us to a long-lost part of ourselves. But these sensory connections aren't just limited to mood or memory. They also actually show up in more structured and predictable ways across the general population. So there was one fascinating study done in 2010 where participants were asked to match different musical characteristics with basic taste qualities like sweet, sour, bitter, and salty. And the results were surprisingly consistent. High-pitched melodic tones were often linked with sweetness, while low, more brassy or dissonant sounds were associated with bitterness. This phenomenon is known as cross-modal correspondence, and this is the brain's tendency to link features from different senses based on shared emotional or structural qualities. And while this happens subconsciously for most of us, for a rare few, sound and taste aren't just associated, they're actually fused. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating corners of music psychology: synesthesia. Now, this is something that's always been fascinating to me, and honestly, it was one of the first music psych topics that really got me hooked. Now, there's several types of synesthesia linking different senses together, but this particular phenomenon is called sound to taste synesthesia, a form of synesthesia where people quite literally taste music. It's officially known as auditory gustatory synesthesia, but it's not a metaphor or a poetic association. It's a genuine sensory crossover hardwired into the brain. Imagine hearing a cello note and instantly experiencing the taste of rich dark chocolate, or a trumpet blast triggering the sharp tang of metal. Some people describe high notes as citrusy or sweet, while low droning tones might bring on the taste of coffee or even bitter herbs. This isn't suggestion or imagination, it's automatic and consistent for those who experience it. Neurologists like David Eagleman have researched extensively about synesthesia, noting that it's not a disorder, but rather a rare and fascinating difference in sensory processing. Now, for this specific variant, it affects around 1 in 2,000 people, which is crazy, but I want to have David Eagleman talk about synesthesia in general, in his own words.
One of the things I study in my lab is called synesthesia, and it represents a blending of the senses. So we've all heard the word anesthesia, which means no feeling. Synesthesia means joined feeling. So somebody with synesthesia, they might hear music and it causes them to see colors physically. Or they might hear something and it puts a taste in their mouth. Physically, they're experiencing that. Or they might eat something and it puts a feeling on their fingertips. The most common forms of synesthesia have to do with overlearned sequences like letters or numbers or weekdays or months triggering a color experience. So somebody might look at the number 6 and that's red to that synesthete, or they look at the letter J and that's purple. And it's an internal experience, it's automatic, it's involuntary, and it's unconscious. And to a synesthete, it's just self-evidently true that J is purple. And it used to be thought, this was very rare. The original estimates were 1 in 20,000, but we now know it's quite common. It's probably up to 4% of the population has some form of synesthesia. There are many different forms, essentially any cross-blending of the senses that you can think of. My colleagues and I have found a case somewhere. So we now know it's very common, and the reason it's so interesting to me is because it's a very good inroad into understanding how different brains can perceive reality differently. So you're sitting here, your neighbor's sitting here, and you're both looking at the same thing, and yet you're seeing the world very differently. And it turns out synesthesia is heritable. So my lab is pulling the genes for it right now. And the reason that's so interesting is because it's what I'm calling perceptual genomics, which is to say, how do little genetic changes change the way we perceive reality? And of course, most synesthetes historically have lived their whole lives, and they may even die without ever suspecting that they're seeing reality differently than someone else, because we all accept the reality presented to us.
It's so interesting because in synesthetes, the boundaries between sensory regions in the brain appear to be more porous. This allows, for example, the auditory cortex to activate areas typically involved in taste and flavor perception, such as the insular or gustatory cortex. Now, it's just fascinating, and I do want to do a whole episode on it and chat with some of you who may experience different types of synesthesia, because honestly, it's beyond intriguing, and I feel like that would be an incredible episode. So I'm working on that. But this sound to taste synesthesia, it reminds us of just how creatively and unexpectedly the brain can wire itself, blending experiences in ways that most of us can only imagine. And while this form of synesthesia is rare, it opens the door to broader questions. What would it mean to compose music that tastes a certain way? Where most of us might find that low sounds seem bitter or high notes feel sweet, synesthetes take this even further. They actually taste them. Their brain isn't just making the connection, it's living it. Now, let's shift our focus from the lab to the dinner table, specifically the restaurant table. Because whether you're grabbing a quick bite at a fast food joint or settling in for a multi-course tasting menu, the music around you is doing more than setting the mood. It's actually shaping your perception of the food, your behavior while eating, and actually even how much you're willing to spend. Background music in restaurants has a surprisingly powerful effect on eating speed, appetite, and even perceived luxury. A well-known study by Milliman done in 1986 found that slow-tempo music in restaurants led diners to spend more time eating, and crucially, more money. When faster-paced music played, customers actually ate more quickly and left sooner, leading to a higher table turnover. But actually, this kind of auditory nudging is often intentional. Fast food restaurants like McDonald's might use upbeat, energetic music to encourage quick consumption, whereas upscale dining spots may lean into ambient or classical music to extend the dining experience and promote a sense of elegance and exclusivity. It's crazy, right? But it's not just about tempo either. The type of music also influences diners' choices and perceptions. One study found that playing classical music, compared to pop music or no music at all, led people in the restaurant to spend significantly more on their meals. The researchers concluded that classical music may enhance perceptions of sophistication and quality, encouraging diners to order more expensive items. So the music doesn't just affect how long you stay, it affects how much you're willing to pay and also how you feel about the food. Like I mentioned, the wine study earlier and chocolate as well. It's not just the food that's changed, it's the frame that we've placed around it. And this sonic intentionality is making its way into branding and marketing as well. Food isn't just about taste anymore, it's about experience, identity, and lifestyle. Lo-fi cafe playlists on Spotify, for example, they've become synonymous with minimalist brunch spots and plant-based eateries, creating an instant association between a certain sound and a certain kind of consumer. Meanwhile, luxury food and beverage brands frequently turn to classical music or jazz in their advertising, using auditory cues to evoke sophistication, heritage, and indulgence. And this is all part of audio branding, a growing trend where music is carefully chosen to match the values and emotional tone of a brand. And in the case of food, to prime not just your buying behavior, but your actual taste experience. Whether it's the lo-fi beats that make your smoothie bowl feel more wholesome, or the elegant piano notes that make a chocolate truffle seem more decadent, music becomes a flavor enhancer in its own right. And some restaurants go even further by using soundscaping, which is the deliberate curation of environmental sounds to match the dishes being served. I think one of the most iconic examples comes from Chef Heston Blumenthal's Sound of the Sea dish, which is served at the Fat Duck in the UK. Alongside a beautifully plated seafood dish, diners are given an iPod in a conch shell playing ocean waves and seagulls. And why is that? Well, it's to enhance the seaside flavors of the food through this multi-sensory narrative. Research was actually done to support this creation, showing that congruent soundscapes can enhance the perception of specific flavor notes, especially when diners are primed with narrative or context. And this is actually the entire premise of Heston Blumenthal's restaurant. It's all about storytelling, and when each dish comes out, it's like an entire experience. I wanted to include here a clip of leading researcher Charles Spence talking about the Sound of the Sea dish and the story behind it, because he was actually part of that entire process of creating it, and he's one of the key researchers in the field. So who better to explain what went into it?
And what they're talking about when they're talking about the whole experience and sort of food as theatre is in part this dish here. This is the Sound of the Sea seafood dish that comes to the table looking like the seashore with sand and foam and seaweed and seafood. But also, on the other hand, the waiter will come with a conch shell out of which dribble some iPod headphones. And this dish is actually based on an experiment that Heston and I did together in Science Oxford. An experiment that shows that the sounds that we hear when we eat do change the food experience. And in this way, it's one of the first examples, I think, of sort of technology being brought to the dining table. In this case, technology from the chef that enhances your meal experience by having the kind of sonic soundtrack or backdrop for that experience.
Actually, I've wanted to go to that restaurant for so long. It's pretty pricey, but I think it's a super innovative concept, and I think the experience could be worth it. Music also plays a subtle but significant role in digestion and portion control. Numerous studies actually suggest that the tempo and the volume of background music can influence how quickly and how much we eat. So calm, slow tempo music actually helps encourage mindful eating, a practice which is rooted in bringing full awareness to the act of eating, engaging all the senses and slowing down your pace of consumption. When we eat slowly and consciously, we not only savor our food more, but we also allow time for the body's safety signals, like the release of hormones such as leptin, to register, helping us actually feel full before we get the chance to overeat. And this was echoed in research done in 2012, which found that participants who dined in environments with softer lighting and mellow music consumed less food, but actually rated their meals as more enjoyable, even though they spent just as much time eating. Now, this finding is being translated into practical tools in the wellness world in a form of mindful eating playlists. These curated soundscapes, often featuring ambient tones, acoustic instruments, or nature sounds, are specifically designed to slow down chewing, reduce stress, and bring attention to each bite. Some meditation and wellness apps even include eating meditations, where music is paired with guided instructions to help people tune into texture, taste, and even gratitude. Think of it as a musical digestive aid, not just entertainment, but a tool to cultivate presence and bodily awareness. In today's world, I think so many of us engage in mindless eating, often watching videos or scrolling on our phones, just needing that constant stimulation even when we eat. But this habit has a disruptive effect on our body's ability to recognize hunger and fullness cues, which can lead to overeating or digestive problems. Studies have shown that distracted eating actually reduces memory of the meal, which in turn increases the likelihood of snacking later. In contrast, mindful eating, which is supported by these calming and intentional soundscapes, can enhance not only the sensory pleasure of food, but also our ability to regulate appetite and digestion. In this way, music becomes more than a background feature. It's part of a holistic sensory practice that encourages us to slow down, savor, and reconnect with the experience of eating. Now, to finish off with, I want to talk about ASMR, or Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. I know it's not music, but it's sound, and it taps into something deeply sensory. If you've ever felt that pleasant tingling sensation from hearing whispering, tapping, or crisp food being chewed, you've experienced ASMR. And in recent years, this phenomenon has exploded into the food world. Platforms like TikTok and YouTube are full of ASMR-rich food content, from mukbangs to hyper-detailed cooking clips. Think of the exaggerated crunch of a fried chicken bite, the soothing sizzle of butter in a pan, or the slurp of noodles. These sounds are intentionally amplified with high-sensitivity microphones, which creates this full-body response that's oddly satisfying and actually incredibly effective at triggering cravings. But this isn't just internet entertainment. There's actually a psychological basis for it. Research has shown that amplified food sounds can heighten our anticipation and perceived enjoyment of food. Another study by the famous Charles Spence found that auditory cues like crunchiness or fizz can influence not only how appetizing a food seems, but how much we want it. We don't eat just with our eyes, we eat with our ears too. There's a reason why the sizzle of a steak just sounds so good. And do you know what? Brands are very aware of this. Food marketing has evolved into sonic branding, where the sound of a product is just as important as its visual appeal. One study actually found that crunchy sound effects in food ads increased viewers' desire to eat, especially among people who are sensitive to external food cues. So when you hear that perfect chip crackle or the fizz of soda being poured, it's not accidental. It's engineered to literally make your mouth water. I think especially fast food giants have leaned into this trend. Most ads now, the focus of them is the sound of fries hitting hot oil or the slap of a burger being assembled. These sounds act as acoustic triggers, creating a multisensory experience that activates hunger and builds emotional connection with the brand. And this actually isn't just limited to advertising. In-store experiences are also being shaped by ASMR as well. Some restaurants and cafes are exploring sound design as part of the dining experience. From open kitchens where sizzling and chopping are part of the ambience, to curated playlists that subtly include food-related ASMR textures to kind of stimulate people's appetite. In such a saturated food landscape, sound really becomes a competitive edge, influencing not just what we eat, but how we feel about the entire eating experience. So whether you're in a sleek cafe or watching a 10-second ad on TikTok, your brain is constantly digesting audio cues, and brands are learning how to feed them to you, one soundbite at a time. It's not just there to sell taste, but it's also there to shape how we feel about the food before it even touches our lips. Does that count as manipulation? Take from it what you will, but it's definitely happening, and I think it's good that we're aware of it. There are certain things that are primal, they're human nature, and of course, one of those things is eating. And of course, brands, chefs, everyone, they all need to do something new, something exciting to get us trying new things, trying new foods, trying new experiences. And we live in such an era of virality as well. And as long as you stand out as a eating experience, you're going to be successful. And auditory cues are such a massive part of that, and so is music. So I think this is really a huge part of the future of dining. I'm surprised I haven't seen more restaurants like Heston Blumenthal's The Fat Duck, with such a key element of storytelling where music is so central to the experience. If you've ever been to a restaurant like that or know of any, I would love for you to let me know. I think it's so intriguing, and I really think it is the future because there's so much fascinating research and enough research for you to do your own little experiment at home as well. I honestly think I need to try it with coffee because I can't stand coffee. It's too bitter for me. I don't even like the smell, but I don't know. Maybe I should try and play some high-pitched, bright timbre, slow tempo music to try and make it taste a bit sweeter or creamier. I definitely have to try that out, but if this episode got you curious, make sure that you try out a little experiment this week. Try to play a sweet, flowing soundtrack while eating something bitter and see if it changes anything. Or try building your own mindful eating playlist, or try one of the ones already out there. Just slow down and really savor each bite of your dinner tonight. But that is all I have for this episode. I know it was a little bit shorter than usual, but I thought it was a fun topic to tackle this week after last week was quite heavy. So the next time you sit down for a meal or sip your morning coffee, try tuning in to what you're hearing. Today, we've seen how music and sound are powerful tools in influencing not just how we feel, but how we taste. It's a reminder that eating is never just about the food. It's about the context and the connection. But thank you so much for joining me today on The Sound Mind. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate or review on wherever you're listening and share it with someone who loves food and music as much as you do. Don't forget to follow us and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Also, come and say hi over on Instagram and Threads at The Sound Mind Talks. I absolutely love to hear your opinions on the episode, the discussion around everything. So yeah, come and say hi. But until next time, keep listening, keep reflecting, and I'll see you on The Sound Mind.